Once again, I would ask if there's anyone that wants to precede me. If not, I'm going to begin. I'll begin by thanking the board for withholding their comments until the hearing process had concluded. I trust that each of you has listened carefully during more than 16 hours of testimony and have weighed all that we've read and heard. My family represents 3 generations and over 200 years of service in South Dakota Public Schools. I've lived in the counties that border Iowa, Nebraska, and Wyoming. I've been on the campuses of Pine Ridge, Todd County, Bennett County, Shenango, Butte, and Red Cloud. I've served Class B schools in Artesian, Class A schools in Gregory, McCook Central, Salem, Lead, Deadwood, and for the last 27 years of my career in Class AA Huron. Public school was my life for over 60 years as a student, teacher, principal, and superintendent. After reviewing everything, I opposed this rewrite of social studies standards for the South Dakota public school children. While it is not illegal to have a person from a private school in Michigan write the standards, I do not believe that they follow the intent of our legislature as articulated in South Dakota Codified Law 13348.1. This law was put in place in 2016 to curtail out-of-state influence in the standards of South Dakota children. I quote from the statute, "The Board of Education may not adopt any uniform content standards drafted by a multi-state consortium which are intended for adoption in 2 or more states." We heard of states being used so far as Louisiana, Florida, and Michigan. However, it goes on to state, nothing in this section prohibits the board from adopting standards drafted by South Dakota educators and professionals which reference uniform content, provided the board has conducted the 4 public hearings. By statute, these hearings are put in place to determine if the citizens of South Dakota have any concerns with the standards recommended by the revision committee that the statute indicates should be made up of South Dakota educators and professionals. These hearings should not be a debate with point-counterpoint, where one side tries to win and discredit another side to lose in either direction. There is no win-win in this process. The longer it's gone on, it's become obvious that it will be a lose-lose endeavor. Over 1,000 South Dakotans have stated their opposition to the out-of-state rewrite. I've spoken in over 40 school districts during in-services. I've asked teachers across the state, where did they grow up? Over 90% of the South Dakota public school educators were born within 75 miles of the school that they serve. The public that are opposed to these standards are the sons and daughters of the prairie and hills of South Dakota. The standards are opposed by school boards elected by the same voters who send their representatives to Pierre. They are strong citizens with high morals and personal patriotism. The clear majority of the board members are Republican, simply by the percentage of voter registration in this state. I listened carefully to those who testified in favor of the standards, including employees of the Department of Ed. I heard from college professors and national historians and disgruntled legislators. I never heard any anecdotal stories about their children's experience in the public schools. I see a great disconnect between the vast majority of proponents and their local school board, school parents, teachers, or board. My late father, a lifelong Republican public school educator, taught his children, remember that people are fundamentally good. Out of respect for Dad's teachings, I don't think there is inherent evil in anyone involved in this rewrite. I don't think there's evil in the removal of educators from the committee. And I certainly don't think there's any evil in the out-of-state people asked for input. I don't believe any are evil. I do believe that they do not know what they do not know about K-12 public education in South Dakota. As I listened to their testimony, I came to the conclusion that none of them would accept going back to their chosen field and having a curriculum dedicated to them without their input or their professional peers' input. I can't imagine it would be okay if the other political party was in power and the standards came from another state. I promise you, I would oppose those standards as well. Concerning the standards, I believe that we have condoned stealing the innocence of children in grades 1 through 3, having them exposed to wars and hatred, and having them learn the brutality of humanity concerning massacres years before we need to steal their childhood. I believe we'll go backwards by losing our focus on South Dakota history in 4th grade and the pride that it produces. The protests we've seen document that we are not meeting the expectations of our Native American brothers and sisters with this proposal. South Dakota public schools currently provide many opportunities to learn history and express patriotism through patriotic songs and through Pledge of Allegiance to the U.S. flag and the South Dakota flag. Educators in South Dakota say the Pledge of Allegiance to their country 174 times a year. Do any of us do that? We should all be proud of the public school opportunities that children have to express their faith, pray their silent prayers, and carry on the traditions of their parents and grandparents while welcoming the traditions and parents of new neighbors. This is also a part of social studies. I do not believe the claims that we are falling behind, and I certainly do not believe there's a progressive agenda in South Dakota that has changed social studies curriculum over the years. Inspecting past standards does not indicate any progressive movement, and the voter registration among new voters each year has skewed conservative for the past 2 decades. In fairness, I have no argument against the concerns over the limited amount of time on social studies. I agree with that, and I welcome a discussion on what credits and teachers we should reduce in order to add teachers and sections to teach more social studies, or a discussion on justifying the cost to add hours or days to the school year. Music teachers would love to double the time we spend on music. Science teachers would focus on science for many more hours. Reading teachers and math teachers have been under the gun to produce better scores, and yes, that has all hampered the number of hours spent on social studies. I believe that this is a real issue, but it's an issue of instructional time and not an issue of standards. I don't doubt that some history or government experts think that they're on the right track by supporting 800 standards rather than 150. I'm just here to say it won't work. I predict that the unintended consequences may find more kids who hate social studies, hate school, and fall further away from successful futures. Great teachers know that you need to connect and love, not hammer, if you want learning to improve. This whole government interference could lead more students and their parents to hate social studies rather than trying to engage. I am personally totally offended by the testimony of legislators who showed disrespect for public school teachers, administrators, and board members. We are not a bunch of union workers in a non-union state. Your comments are mean-spirited and totally unfounded by the work that we do. I do believe there will be unintended consequences in forcing this document on teachers who are a product of South Dakota. If approved, there will be people who leave the profession rather than become pawns. There will be fewer people who go into the profession, and particularly into teaching social studies. And there will be an outward migration of teachers to other professions or other states where their intellect, their commitment, and their professionalism are valued. I know it's not popular, but I do believe process does matter. The expense of this venture is already over $400,000. The stated budget for implementation another $800,000. However, information sent from the Sioux Falls School District alone estimates the implementation in their district exceeds $3 million. Parlay that expense across the entire state, and the cost is staggering. I personally believe that Governor Noem has good intent. I was honored when asked to serve on this board. I appreciate the governor's support for salaries and her support for CTE. I'm proud that the governor has boasted about our successful public schools as she communicates with others. However, I do not believe she's receiving sound South Dakota advice on how to continue the best education for South Dakota children. I don't believe out-of-state solutions are needed to best provide for our South Dakota kids. The Department of Education website says, and I quote, South Dakota academic content standards serve as expectations for what students should know and be able to do by the end of each grade. The review, revision, development, and feedback process involves stakeholders throughout the state of South Dakota and is an ongoing and critical component to ensure South Dakota students in every classroom receive current and relevant learning experiences. The goal that all students will graduate college, career, and life ready. Content standards are set by this board, reviewed every 5 to 7 years. In the final comment, content standards do not mandate a specific curriculum, unquote. I will vote no and support 4 hearings on the original 2021 proposed standards, including the great work that was supported by our Native American citizens in the development of the 2021s. I welcome all members of the 2021 and 2022 commissions to participate in the examination of the 2021s and incorporate anything from the 2022s that appear to be missing. In the meantime, I am very comfortable with continuing with the 2015 standards as we work through this difficult time. And finally, I will respect this process and I will respect this vote. Anyone else want to comment?
Mr. President, I thought we were not going to have participation of the audience, but I guess that's not quite the case. I just wanted to correct you on your reference to South Dakota Statutes 13-3-48-1. I happen to have a copy of it, and it's very clear in that it says prior to July 1 of 2016, the Board of Education may not, pursuant to, adopt any multi-state consortium. So this, your reference that this was applicable, I'm not so sure that the consultant used, both consultants, I guess, in this process were from out of state, but that they're part of a multi-state consortium. But even if they were, it doesn't apply. And furthermore, I think the references that you were making that we should only use South Dakota educators and professionals, that was simply allowed because after they'd prohibited that, they had to go someplace. And I think this was all in reference to Common Core. Now, I'm not an expert on South Dakota education history, but I think I'm right on that, and I think it deserves some correction on your part because I think you misled us in the beginning. And I hate to say that as a new member, but I have to.
I agree with you that it's a reference to Common Core, but as I watched that process take place, my understanding is that there was a concerted effort by the legislature to make sure that we did not join into Common Core activities.
But it doesn't apply now, as you referred to. Isn't that correct?
I respect your opinion.
Okay.
My understanding, I didn't try to mislead. My understanding of it's just differently.
Okay. Well, I didn't say it in an adversarial sense. It might have sounded a little bit like it because I'm a new member and I don't like to take on the president. But I think when an error is made, it needs to deserve to be corrected, particularly when we're talking about the law.
Again, I appreciate your comments sincerely. I want everyone to say what needs to be said.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Heineman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think you can see what the conversation has led to when we've had 2 longtime superintendents, very well respected in the state of South Dakota, have very different opinions. And so I think for a board member who perhaps was not as familiar with social studies, I was a math major, not as familiar with social studies, I just want to thank everybody. This has been an unbelievable exercise. To see everybody here over 4 meetings, I have learned personally so much going through all of this. And as someone mentioned earlier, she was 74. You do have somebody your same age here. It has been, I found these standards, and I'll be very honest, I found them very exciting. When I read through some of this information, and so I guess first of all, I got to thank the governor for starting the conversation. I have to thank Dr. Ben Jones. I mean, over and over, his emphasis is on content-rich knowledge. You know, and we are doing content standards. So, I mean, that is what we're supposed to be focusing on, is the content. And when I went back and read all of this, I either have forgotten almost all of it or maybe didn't ever know it. But again, thank you. I have to thank Dr. Graves. He walked into something knowing what a challenge it was going to be, and it will be. Whatever the vote is, it's going to be a challenge. But he took it on, I think, because he has great commitment to the South Dakota students, and he has a great confidence in the administrators and the teachers of this state that whatever this outcome is, they'll make it work. They'll make these standards come alive for kids if that's what the final outcome is. You know, and I'm hopeful when I see all of over the last 4 meetings, all of the passion on both sides. And I mean, we've got opponents and proponents. We've got great educators on both sides. We've got great experts on both sides. So I'm hopeful that when the final outcome, and I'm going to be honest, I'll be voting for it, that we do have these standards, that they take all this energy and channel it into making these standards work, to making them come alive for kids, and taking in all the conversation from the opponents, you know, making them work as well as possible. But I do think it's exciting. I will say one thing. The opponents, I hope they know we've listened to them. One of the things was the age appropriateness. So I had to go back to 1st and 2nd and 3rd grade, and I talked to a lot of people who have taught. There are tremendous resources out there. I read a book about, it's a primary book that talks about ancient history and how you can tell this ancient histories in stories that make it come alive. So I just, again, thank you everyone for the energy. Obviously there is a great, great love of our kids, and they want the very best for them. And I just have to thank you all for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you.
President Nebelsup.
Go ahead.
I talked to Terry in the hallway, and he wanted to know if I wanted to go first, and I said, no, you go first, and I'll just say ditto when you're all done. I agree with it, except the one mistake you might have made. I'm a lifetime educator. Grew up on a dairy farm up in northeastern South Dakota. Been in education since 1980. I'm a current superintendent of schools in beautiful Belle Fourche, South Dakota, home of the Black Hills Roundup. If you ever want to come see a good rodeo, come to Belle Fourche. This isn't what I signed up for. I was asked by Secretary at that time, Sanderson, if I would want to be on this board, and I was honored. I still am. But when the social studies standards came out, the first proposed standards that had 2 of my Belle Fourche teachers on the standards, and then they were pulled, those 2 teachers came to me and said, what happened? We were on that committee. We put a lot of time into that committee. Why aren't our voices going to be heard? I didn't have an answer. I didn't know. I said it wasn't me. I didn't do that. Then we turn around and have the standards developed by a college out of state. If we needed to do that, guess what? We have a lot of good colleges in South Dakota that could have done that. This has become way too divisive. This isn't what South Dakotans are about. We work together. When there's a crisis in South Dakota, we help each other. We don't get on each other's nerves. We don't start arguments. We work together. Come on, folks. Grew up on a farm. Dad didn't have equipment. We borrow it from our neighbors. They let us. You know why? Dad fixed it when he gave it back. It came back to them in better shape than what we borrowed them. That's what we're about. Let's do something that turns out to be in better shape than what we have in front of us. Let's let those first standards come in front and be heard, and we can look at them, we can chew them up, we can spit them out, but we'll at least get a chance to look at them. I am going to vote no on these standards, and I don't know where everybody else is going to go, but I'm going to sleep well tonight. Thank you.
Next, please. None are required and all are welcome. Are there other comments?
Mr. President?
Please.
I will say that I respect the process, and it has been a long process, that's for sure. For me personally, since the 2021 standards were rolled out, I received several comments personally, whether it be by phone or email or in person, saying how they thought they were horrible, we needed to change something. Since we rolled out these that we're talking about now, I have received, and I'm not talking about through the Department of Ed, and then they get spread out to the board members. I'm saying personally, if I'm in public, my private email or my cell phone, in the 8 months I've received 2 that opposed them. And that's not very many, considering I'm not that hard to get a hold of. So again, respecting the process. I'm also talking from a mom. I have 3 children, all that have gone to school, K through 12, and now are in college, all 3 of them. And we took them to Washington, D.C. approximately 10 years ago. At that time, they were 2 in middle school and 1 in grade school. And frankly, I was appalled by what they didn't know. All of the monuments, all of the museums, Mount Vernon, everything we went to, it's like they had heard of it for the first time, which actually I think is kind of embarrassing. And so I do feel that we do need to change these, and I do feel that these are very good standards, and I will be voting for them.
Thank you. Any others?
Mr. President. Yes.
Linda?
I just would like to make a few more comments. I really appreciate all of the Lakota people being here today, and I live and teach on the Cheyenne River Reservation. I've taught there for 44 years, and I greatly value their history, and I truly feel like we need to do a better job of incorporating it. I guess I'm a little bit confused because I feel like the 2022 standards do have more Lakota history than they have previously. And so I guess I am a little bit confused about that, but I do believe that the standards are a step in the right direction, and I feel that I was a gifted teacher for a while. I feel like we need to set our standards high. And I've taught for the last 9 years for Oglala Lakota College, and now I have I've enjoyed that being, a teacher of teachers, and learned even more about the Lakota history. And so I will agree that we need to do a better job of including that history, but I believe we can continue to make something better even better.
Thank you. Anyone else choose to speak?
I too have learned a lot going over these 2 years. I was on the 2021 committee, so I know a little bit about that. And this whole process, I've been so appreciative of everybody that's testified and their focus and their enthusiasm with what they believed. I've talked to kids for over 50 years, chairside. I don't teach, but and I've been amazed more by what they don't know than by what they know. And like you, I find that they don't know our American history. I mean, their reading and math isn't so hot either. And if you read the proficiency reports of all the schools in South Dakota, they don't get 5 stars, that's for sure. And so I know that the status quo probably for me isn't good. And I'm hoping that these new standards are in a direction that we can all live with and work on, and that there will be a coming together of everybody to make them really, really work. and I will be voting for them.
Any other comments? Steve?
Mr. President, as everybody knows, I'm new to this group, and I was just recently appointed a few months ago. In that process, I was interviewed by the governor, and I was just asked by what I thought about educational standards, and I said, you know, I've got kids, and I got grandkids, and I got friends with kids, and whatever. And I said the concern I have is when I read this data, and it's like we have reading proficiencies of 52% or 60% or whatever, you know. I said maybe it's even 70%, but I said the biggest thing that concerns me isn't those that passed, it's the 30% that didn't. I mean, we're dealing with human lives here. This isn't some rejected widget or something that we can just kind of throw into the scrap pile. These are living human beings that are going to be around on this earth for many, many years. And I said, it bothers me. They're failing. And what are we sentencing them to? A life that in this very technical, educated world and stuff. And I said, and I said, I don't blame our teachers. I know I've had to. We got family members that teach, and God bless you folks. I mean, of what you see coming into the classroom sometimes, and the homes and problems that kids bring. But we've got to do better. We can't allow 30% failing. I said, I was in the meat business, and I said, I can tell you, if our quality control would have come to me and said, well, Steve, you know, you're running this operation, we got 30% failure rate, we would have been broke before the month was out. And I remembered, you know, just a number of other things. So I approached it with that idea that we got to do better. And when I hear about our citizenship and things and it's falling, I know full well. I've been involved in government on the city and local level, and certainly seen the national level and stuff. We've got to have an educated system. Our Constitution, which I took an oath to support and defend in the state of South Dakota, says that we need that. Our founding fathers and I think there were a few founding mothers in that process too, and certainly our U.S. thing. So that concerns me, and we have to do better. And I don't think anybody in this room is going to rise and say, no, this is just as good as it can ever get. And I don't know how we're going to do that, but we got to start doing it. And I think sometimes the content is there. The other thing that bothered me in this process is in my confirmation hearing. You know, I was opposed by the SDEA and the Superintendents Association, the administrators, because I wasn't an expert, because I wasn't a teacher, because I didn't care, and I was involved in healthcare in a governance end of it, and I remember some stories there. Remember going way back in history, one Ignatius Semmelweis. I'm not going to belabor the whole point here, but back in 1846, he was a guy. He was concerned because he looked in Switzerland at the birthing centers, and for some reason, the women that gave birth to the birthing the deliverers, the nurses, they basically survived. But 5 times higher women got septic and died, and those that were birthed by doctors. And so he studied all that. You know, the experts were having 5 times more deaths, and that was a lot of them. Like 40% of them died. And he found out that the one difference is that the nurses washed their hands between going from woman to woman on the delivery. He tried to get that implemented to the doctors. Oh, no. They were the experts. They knew it. They were kind of proud of their vests with all the blood on it and everything. And, Joseph Lister, of course, found it out in 1864, some 20 years later, that there were bacteria. You know, you think that he was able to get the experts convinced that what they were doing was wrong? No. Finally, by the 1890s, we adopted, the experts finally kind of came to the conclusion that it was there. I'm not saying that you teachers are wrong or anything else, but I'm just saying there is a different way to look at things, and sometimes we get tunnel visions. I've been an expert in some things, too. I'm a pilot, and I can tell you, there's a lot of dead pilots out there they didn't die because their skills were low. They just didn't question themselves sometimes enough, and they were just dead sure that they were going right. I can tell you another one out of healthcare. You know, the experts, the doctors, this is a lot more recent. We had wrong site surgery. Huge, big problem. I was involved and chaired the American Hospital Association board. and you know, the doctors want to, you know, hey, this just happens. I mean, it's part of the thing. We're dealing with living human things. It's totally different, you know, and it's different than any other business and what have you, than anything, and it just happens. And you know, finally, I just said to him, I said, you know, if you took your car in to get it repaired, and you needed a new water pump, and the guys in the repair shop put in a new battery, are you gonna pay for it? Of heaven's sakes, no. But the doctors, they were saying, well, you got to pay for these things even too. When you go in for the right knee and they give you the left knee, well, you should pay for the left knee. Again, experts. I'm not saying that we're all experts in something, but we all have to question ourselves. So I just say that to all of you educators. I respect you. I think that you're very, but I just caution you and ask some questions. Are you dead sure on this? Because the mistakes we are making, the 40 and the 50% failure rates, and I don't think we got any more than 60% passing rates. If any of you are from schools that have 70, but it's still then the 30%. These are human lives. These are children. They are going to be with us, and their problems will be our problems in society. We can't allow that much of a failure. I would have been broke in business. So I ask you, I'm here to help you. I want to do everything I can. But we've got to do better. We cannot allow that to continue and expect a free republic to continue. That's the background that I'm coming from. And so when I look at these, I say, is it improvement? It seems to be an improvement to me. I think that we need to learn more of the classical education type of environment. I think we've thrown that out, and I think Dr. Graves made some very good points there about that. That's why I'm going to be voting in favor of this. And it's not perfect, but in business, I never had a perfect solution to anything, but I think it's an improvement. We're going to have to continue to work together. I plead with you to work with us on this, and that, you know, to restore and let's increase the civic thing. So that's my viewpoint as a new member coming on board here, but one who's very concerned about this, and it's been a good deal of time in my life wondering about our kids and what we're learning and how we can improve it, and that's why I'm here.
Any other comments? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make one comment. I thought all of the Native American students that came and testified did an amazing job. I thought their words were great, and I just, you know, Hans Fuller kind of finished, and he said, we've got to come together. And I thought, you know, whatever the result is at the end, I do think that's a great advice. We've got to come together.
Any other comments?
One other thing, Mr. President, I was just wondering if Secretary Graves could just, can you inform us a little bit if we approve these?
A question. Okay.
Question.
Go ahead. What's the question?
If we approve I mean, how might these, what's the implementation type of thing? I mean, obviously we've got a lot of people concerned about it. A number of educators voiced opposition to it. I was this former city manager, you know, when the troops are out there, but yet we're going to move forward. So if it is approved, how are we going to implement it?
Yes, and I think Dr. Ben Jones did a nice job talking about that this morning, as did Shannon. And we've got a 2-year implementation process. We're going to do summers, these civics and history summits, both this summer and next summer, and we're going to now start tailoring those towards the standards that are approved. We've got the road trips, those will be both summers as well. We're going to be forming a great deal of professional development, and we're going to be bringing in teachers. We've already contacted 95 publishers and asked for preview copies of books, because it's our intention to provide materials to the school districts, knowing that the cost of this thing is going to be pretty extensive. And we're going to be bringing in teachers at grade levels to help us select those books. These will not be textbooks. These will be reading books. We're trying to integrate this into the reading program so that we have enough time in the school day, because that's always the challenge, to integrate social studies with reading at the elementary level. So we're looking at a very extensive implementation, and we're already on the road to that as we speak.
Mr. President, just if I could follow up with a couple questions. One, obviously nothing's perfect, as I said, so assuming these have some problems, some glitches in them as we take this new approach, are we prohibited from, you know, revisiting these things in a year down the line? Not revisiting the entire things, but I mean to make the changes, the improvements that the department and working with educators might find?
Yeah, I believe the state board has that ability. Should we bring that back to them, Amanda?
Okay.
So as we go through the implementation process, we would then bring back anything we needed to bring back.
So we haven't chiseled these in Mount Rushmore or anything like that. Okay. Last question I
Just a
had.
second. Amanda, would you please put your comments on microphone so those that are listening
Oh, yeah, good,
were available?
good
I
point.
forgot, this is my first time having a microphone, so,
It's not much fun, but go ahead.
thank you. So the board does have the ability to revise any standard schedule. So if the board wishes, you could revise the social studies or any standards at a different time.
Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, Mr. President, Secretary Graves, I heard a lot of reference that this was written by Hillsdale College. I mean, was our contract, the state's contract, was it with Hillsdale or was it with Mr. Morrison or whatever his name was? And the second part of that then is, I know he's affiliated, I guess, or was at one time with Hillsdale, but some other credible sources said, well, you know, all the books that are going to be used now will come from Hillsdale Publishing, and isn't that a conflict? And so maybe you could address those two questions.
Yeah, that's incorrect. We've reached out to 95 different publishers, and we're collecting the preview copies now. We'll be making the selections with groups of teachers at grade level appointments. So I think the Penguin Random House were actually the ones with the most books that under that publisher. So no, I don't see that as an issue, I guess.
And then our contract, was it with Hillsdale or?
I'm not familiar. That preceded me.
Mr. President, the contract was with William Morrissey as the facilitator. He did not write the standards. He facilitated the process.
Any other comments from board members? I would entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I would move to approve.
I have a motion to approve the standards.
Second.
I second it.
I have a second, and I will recognize Heineman was first with the second. Call for the roll. Excuse me, one more protocol. Any other comments after the motion? Call for the roll.
Heineman.
Aye.
Myers.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Perkins.
Aye.
Willard.
No.
Westra.
Aye.
Nebelstedt.
No.
5 ayes, 2 nays. Motion carries.